Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Daisy Jones and the Six Rewatch podcast. When I speak, my topic is something I call Take the Doughnut, which is another way to say carpe diem. It's all about going after the things that you want in life. And something that I wanted to do this year was rewatch the show Daisy Jones and the Six and talk about it with other people. So here we are. We're doing another lovely interview today with a cast or crew member. And I just wanted to give a quick housekeeping item before I introduce my guest for today. I try to stay spoiler free for the episode recaps up until the episode that you're on. But these interviews, we could mention any detail from any episode. So just be aware of that up front. If you haven't seen the whole show, we could very well spoil something. So maybe go back and watch it all and then come back to this interview. But if you're in for this interview, I'm very excited to welcome my guest for today, who is Mike Poole, who is the music mixer for the whole show. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here and to learn about your role along the way as well. But I think the first question that needs to be asked here is, how did you get connected with this show?
I came to this show because of the music supervisor, Frankie Pine. She and I have worked on other shows in the past, in particular a serial drama called Nashville that we did 6 seasons on, 20 plus episodes per season. So we got a lot of working together under our belt, because each in that show we would have 4 to 6 on-camera performances per episode. So there was a lot of music in that show. So when Daisy came up as a potential thing, and since it was going to be such a music-heavy and music-dependent show, she was nice enough to give me a shot.
I think once you've worked on a show like Nashville and you're a music mixer, you could probably handle just about anything. I mean, this show, maybe you would have seen, at least for 10 episodes compared to 20 plus episodes in a season, maybe would have seemed like a lighter load than you had done in the past. As the music mixer for this show, what does that job actually entail?
It's a little bit of a floating description. It can vary depending on the specifics of the show. In this one, um, what what we mostly had to deal with was the fact that we were working with primarily pre-recorded performances, um, and yet those performances need to feel as if they are happening in front of you as you're watching the scene happen. And there are a variety of things that need to be done to not break the magic of the scene, and make you feel really connected to what's going on emotionally at the moment. So um, it in my case, it comes from trying to make sure the pre-records are done in a way that's helpful, and then taking those pre-records, editing them down to fit the picture, and then adjusting the sonics and the performances so that everything is in sync. Everything sounds like it's occurring in that space that you're seeing, um, and so forth. And then I send my finished mixes to the show's dubbing mixers, who then integrates them into the final mix of the show.
My understanding was that a lot of the when we see actors singing in this show, a lot of that was what they were at least on set singing it live. But it sounds like you were working with the pre-records to get the audio quality that you wanted when you were doing like the final edit. Is that fair to say?
This show had as opposed to some others where it may be primarily pre-records or totally pre-records. This one was interesting in that it was a big combination of the pre-records, um, things that were recorded on set live, and every now and then a little bit of a pre-record after the scene was done, to just to knit everything together and make it fit fit the flow of the scene very well. So a lot of different places for a lot of this.
Hmm. Interesting. So for a role like that, what other departments or roles on the crew would you work with primarily?
Um, uh, well, it starts from everywhere from the production team that's making the pre-records so that things get recorded in a way that will work well visually later.
Mhm.
Um, with the production mixers, who are the people recording the sound on set, making sure that the components that we may need to use as actual show audio later gets recorded in a way that's very usable and fits our needs for later on for post. And then later, everyone on the post team, um, both the music editors and in a lot of cases the dialogue editors, to work with. And what we do, and the sometimes the boundaries of our territories are a little blurred because some of us may be more able to handle one aspect of the production, and where some other people may need to do their better job on another aspect.
Hmm. So I often ask about prep work for the different, especially well, for anybody that I'm talking to. It's hard to imagine what you would have been able to do for that, for your role, but what kind of prep work can you do for your role, if any?
Mostly, other than coming to the assignment, knowing a lot of what's going to be entailed. I would say that it would be speaking to the production team who's going to be making the pre-records in order to make sure that they're going to, in this case, like that they're going to be relatively period correct in the way things sound, that things are recorded separated out properly, that sometimes they're recorded with a variety of different perspectives, sonic perspectives, not just the mic in front of the vocal kind of things, like ones similar to ADR where you make it a distant take on something. Some alternate performances included. So all that set up ahead of time uh, to get stuff that's specifically going to work for the video in a way that's better than just what we would normally record for an album recording. So starting there, and then in this show there were pretty intense rehearsal sessions and getting the actors to play together as a band would play, not only look but sound kind of like they would as a band. And so in that case, working with some of the team that was helping there with the music coaches, with the instrumental coaches, with some production crew that would be doing some of the on-set recording specific to the musical performances, not just the regular dialogue recordings, but ones that sort of fleshed out and gave us more coverage for the musical performance recordings. Um, just sort of getting a game plan for what needed to go down there. Um, and then once things started rolling in, once production had actually started, then taking a listen and seeing what maybe we needed to improve the coverage somewhere, what things needed to happen. So um, just trying to get all the bases covered and set up before production actually started, so there weren't any surprises. Things like on-set monitoring and making sure if we were going to need in ears or whatever ways of uh, letting the actors do perform their scenes well and not get in their way too much.
Hmm. For for the work that you do, how much information did you have on, let's say, tone of the show or tone of each episode before you sort of went in to do your final work?
I had read the book. I had read the novel, so I had a good idea of what the arc of it would be. And then uh, prior or as production was going on, I would also review the scripts and the notes that were given there. So I would be kind of aware of what some conflicts may be or some special case things that needed to happen ahead of time. So just kind of keeping up with the flow of what's going on in the production the whole way.
Hmm. One more general question. I mean, I would like to ask you about specific episodes that you worked on, but one more general
Mhm.
question. I know you've worked on a number of shows and movies at this point in your career. What stands out to you as something that was different in either the sound or the process of working on this show?
Um, I would say any show that's this music heavy is a little different in its own, where the music does play such a big part of the plot line. And in this one, it was so important to present the arcs of the band's musical growth. In other words, they're not going to start out sounding great. They're going to start out sounding pretty good, and then to just be able to expand and show improvement and more maturity in the band as they went through the process, and in this show how it aspects of it get messed up as well later.
That's actually been something. So it's one of the reasons I was so excited to talk with you because it's something I've been tracking during these deep dives of the episodes of, what is the evolution of their sound and their look as they evolve as a band in a variety of different ways,
Mhm.
and as individual performers as well. So I was pretty excited to dig back into each episode and think about what specific questions I want to ask in that regard. And so let's get into that piece. In episode one, which is called Come and Get It, we're going to see the Dunn brothers start coming together. They're all brand new to this band. They're developing their craft. We are going to get, in this episode, we're going to get snippets of songs like Susie Q and Have Love Will Travel, but we're getting those songs across the episode as they're getting more and more exposure to different types of shows. They're performing more locally. So, what are some of the things that you can do in the mixing to help us see what just seems like an upward trajectory, just like a progression all the way through of the band in terms of their experience level?
Um, Mostly a lot of sort of subtle musical cues that an audience might associate um, with hearing a newish band or less experienced band. Things where, like in the early garage recordings, letting the music mix be a little janky, letting the tones of the instruments be kind of abrasive at times or loud and clattery at times. Sometimes a little tentative. Uh, just some things where you subtly the performance aspects aren't featured in a way that makes it all seem a little bit more chaotic and not quite as together as things are going to be later. One wouldn't expect to walk into a teenager garage band rehearsal and have things having been in those situations, expecting to hear things sound very polished at all. It was, I would say, it was notable in that, uh, from what I can remember, all the notes played were pretty much correct. That was like an actual polished aspect of these performances. So that and giving some room uh, for things to improve as the episode moves on, so that the early recordings definitely sound a little bit more chaotic and unfinished. And then as they get better, as we start seeing them performing in the frat parties or yard party, whatever you see, to where they've picked up some more confidence and sounds can be allowed to be a little bit more finished. Uh, Parts can be a little bit more exposed for what they are for good playing, and just showing a little bit more confidence as they become a better band.
I imagine I imagine with something like that, you're working with all of the different instruments and vocals isolated when you're working on mixing the track differently for these performances. So like if it well, first of all, is that true? And if it is, um, do you find that there's if you manipulate one thing, it makes the sound of the whole song sound drastically different to you in the way that you want, or is it kind of evenly working on each piece of the track?
Um, I would say it's a combination of all those. The first of all, yes, everything pretty much is separated. I do recall that some of the really early type recordings were a little bit more less less defined and less separated, which was very appropriate for the scenes. I think the earliest couple of songs that we hear the Dunn Brothers doing maybe were a little bit uh, uh, recorded in a way that were not as precise, which was exactly the right thing to do. But then as we get into the later ones, due to the nature of filmmaking, yes, things will be pretty much totally isolated from each other. They were often performed at the same time, but just sonically isolated.
Mm.
Um, so, and in regard to occasionally a singular element will be very sensitive. Vocals primarily because that's what we as humans really tend to focus on when someone is singing. So usually a change in the vocal performance or the sound of it or the energy level of it can make a bigger difference than sometimes an equivalent change in a musical part would do. But it's all comes on a case by case basis where sometimes it's doing a little bit to everything. Sometimes it's doing a lot to one thing or a lot to everything that makes the difference
Mm.
in the way it looks.
Interesting. Well, at the end of this same episode, we're going to see Daisy singing. She's going to sing By Myself in a bar that has a piano.
Mm-hmm.
We hear her play the song almost all the way through, but then partway into the song, we're going to get a very heavily edited section in the middle where we're going to do sort of a montage of the Dunn brothers as they're driving to California in their van. When you have a sequence like this and you know that there's going to be this very edited section in the middle for us to see a different visual side of what's happening, how do you approach something like that?
There's two levels where that needs to happen. One is the structural level of the song and just the amount of time that has to be expanded or accommodated. And so that is usually come up with either by the editor, the film editor. Some people were very good at choosing sections of the song and so on to expand to fill a scene like that. Sometimes it's a collaboration where they say, "Hey, I need to get from point A in the song and visually to point B. What should we be doing underneath that?" And so there's usually a little bit of collaboration there to make sure that the lyrics of those sections are very fitting to the visual that's going on, so that the flow of the song continues underneath. This is where one of those things where uh, it's actually one of the parts of working on music intensive shows like this that I love, where what begins as an on camera performance then actually becomes the score. It becomes not tied necessarily to what's going on in actuality to what we're seeing, but it is still very much tied emotionally to what we're seeing. And so to have a track that begins as an on camera and then morphs into a piece of score, and then sometimes, like it does in this scene, where it actually goes back into the on camera the function of what the music is doing and how it changes through that entire sequence is an interesting and fun thing to work on in these
So,
shows.
so when you're working on that, do you have like a final visual edit that you're working
At
against?
that point, yes,
Mhm.
it's what to go back as part of the general flow. I'll get the pre-records in their full song length, and then when we get an idea of what the is going to be filmed for each scene, there'll usually at least be a partial cut down so that we're not, if we know we're only going to be using a 30-second segment of the song for that scene, there's often not a full recording of the 3.5 or 4 minute song made of that scene. So there'll be some uh, economy reached by choosing a smaller section or using a an abbreviated version of the song as we film. So that happens initially before it goes to set, and then after the scene is shot and after the film editor has gone through and cut down the scene to what they needs to be, then I will get back that version of the video and tweak the music cut to fit what's going on with the video. And that way I'm also aware of what the arc of that scene is, what the important parts sonically are going to be to what we're seeing and so on. So yes, at that point, I'm working with what is presumably a locked cut, visual cut of the film. Sometimes there'll be a few back and forths as the scene develops as it's cut, but that's just part of the normal process of the editing going on.
Yeah.
But yes, the our brains process what we're hearing very differently if we are just hearing music as opposed to when we are looking at a visual in conjunction with that music. Things work totally differently. And so that's a big part of my mixing is that it has to happen to the video so that so that I know what the emotional drivers are at that point.
Okay. Well, so in episode two, which is called "I'll Take You There," we're going to get another progression. So the Dunn brothers are playing shows in McNasty's for months. We're going to
Yeah.
hear songs like "Look Me in the Eye" and "Flip the Switch," featured quite a lot in this episode. There are two things that we're tracking with their, if you want to call it, progression in this particular episode. One is their increasing comfort level of playing with each other. They're gelling a lot more as a band. They've gotten a lot more experience in front of audiences. But we also get Billy's decline with his addiction. And to me, those are opposite principles of they need to
Mhm.
sound better and they need to sound worse all at the same time. So how did you handle these contradictory things that needed to happen?
Um, as I remember, the performances musically, I would work with that thing of it maybe sounding a little disjointed for the earlier performances, and then later the the musical tones can, even in the course of hearing one song, as it morphs from an early performance into one months later. Um, just the tones can get a little bit better. The emphasis on particular parts of the song can get uh, more emphatic, and the tightness of the band can be emphasized a little bit more. Um, and so musically, that can be happening. And then as we start having more trouble with Billy and his issues, then we hear the band playing better, but then we start to hear some of the vocal performances not being good, or his guitar performances not being as good. I think that I believe it's in this episode where there may be some cases where I maybe uh, at some point in the song stopped using the pre-recorded electric guitar um, from the original recording of the song, and then replacing, like when Billy's having trouble playing or being sloppy with his playing, and perhaps even uh, replace the guitar to the visual so that it looks and sounds exactly the same, which entails making mistakes and being bad at times. And so I think just a contrast between the band getting better, uh, the other members of the band getting better, and Billy having more of an issue, being treated as two separate arcs, as you say. Um, Hopefully, made that work pretty well.
I mean, it worked for me, that's for sure. I mean, we could tell enough that I could ask that question. I mean,
Mhm.
and then we get to episode 3, Someone Saved My Life Tonight. We're going to get, I don't know how much work you had to do on this particular section, but I'm curious. We get a series of guys trying out for the band. They want to be the new Billy Dunn, and they're trying out with fragments of the song "Look Me in the Eye." Um, is this a sequence that you worked on? And if so, how do you work on something like this?
I would say that I did do a little mixing on that, but as far as the performances, that was just great calls by casting and by whoever was directing those scenes. I thought those worked out really well, and they made some really good choices of which ones to use. The sort of the comedy of it is great. And so other than taking the tracks that we're hearing in that environment that we think we're hearing them in, and then later as in that scene as Eddie uh, presents himself as a possibility, which with a little bit more fleshed out version of the song. I think I did a little bit more actual mixing work on that, but I would say no, that was just great filming on the part of the production team.
Yeah, that was a fun sequence. And then, something I was noticing in this episode is that sometimes we'll hear songs as a character records them in a self-made demo tape.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing because those have to sound different too. So in this one, we're going to hear Billy's version of Honeycomb played for
Mm-hmm.
Teddy and then played to a room full of execs. And I think at some point we're going to hear Daisy. We're going to see Daisy hear it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Daisy has something like this happen with Teddy as well with a song that she's working on. So, what work goes in from your standpoint on making these songs sound like they're self-made recordings, especially with the particular technology Daisy and Billy would have had access to at the time?
Um, Primarily, what you're hearing is the work of the music team making the pre-records. That's Blake Mills and Tony Berg. And you're that's a case where it's like, hey, we have a scene. Uh, this is going to be a demo tape that is played by uh, one of the characters for someone who's trying to help them along in their career. So I would normally receive those just as a simple recording, piano vocal or guitar vocal, that sort of thing. I believe portions of these throughout the show may have actually been on-set performances, but the ones that were clearly pre-records that were presented as cassette tapes. Um, uh, I was usually given very basic recording of it, and then I then did the stuff that I do to make it sound like it's coming off of a cassette. Sort of making it a little bit more lo-fi and adding some hiss, that kind of stuff, just to make it sound like the right media.
Hmm. Okay, very good. And so in this episode, we also get a Daisy and Billy vocal recording of Look at Us Now or Honeycomb, depending on who you are. You might call it a
Mm-hmm.
different thing.
Mm-hmm.
In episode 5, which is Fire, we're going to get a recording of Let Me Down Easy. And then these are songs that we're both going to hear later in a concert atmosphere. So I'm curious when I know did you have one pre-record for these things that you were working with to try to change how it sounded in all these atmospheres, or did you have like a version that would be for the studio version of it versus something else you were playing with for the concert version? Like how many different pre-record, was it just the one?
From uh, for most of the songs in the show, there I would say there would be one master pre-record, but um, what was approached differently is that I may have had alternate performances within that pre-record. In other words, I had the electric guitar parts that you hear on the soundtrack version. But then maybe I also had some other electric guitar parts that were more representative of what had been played live, a little bit more freer and less worked out. So I would say within the basic pre-records, I often had choices in terms of which parts to use in order to make them more appropriate for each performance of the scene. Um, through in a lot of cases, like speaking back to Nashville, the other show, we would frequently have a song that might appear um, two times in one episode, but also appear three times later in later episodes. And in that case, we frequently, again, based everything on one primary pre-record, but with a lot of choices within that. And so, same thing here. There were basic basic parts that the actors would have mind to when playing the scene, and then maybe after getting it back, maybe I altered some parts, some guitar parts, or whatever to better fit what we're seeing. Maybe used a little bit of what they played on set that day for portions of it, and or maybe re-recorded some parts to fit more accurately what we're looking at. So, um, but for the most part, you're hearing the same basic version in many cases, just with a lot of different uh, tailoring in each aspect for each scene.
So when we get to episode 4, which is I Saw the Light, we're going to see Daisy brainstorming the song that's going to be Type of Guy. And the song develops as the episode goes on. And I think that's one of the things this show does really portrays very well, because we see more than one song treated this way of like they're working it out. They're working on the ideas for it. The same thing is going to happen with Let Me Down Easy in the next episode. So with something like that, when you're trying to portray this like songwriting process and all of the thinking that has to go into that, how many different versions of the track are you working with at that point? Or is some of that being mixed from what's being done on set during like the filming process? How does that work?
But yes,
Hmm.
it can come from any of those sources, and often several. Um, a lot of seeing this is informed by the fact that I have made records for a long time as well, and I've seen this process uh, um, in real life go through. So that certainly helps in the trying to reproduce that experience for someone watching. It's like, okay, certain little pieces sort of are there at the very beginning of the song, and they hang on, they live throughout the whole process, and they become that core element. But a lot of the more fleshed out portions of the song don't come until later, or until it's actually being worked out in the studio by the band. And so in this case, I think it's just a matter of being able to latch onto the important and identifiable bits earlier in the song, so that maybe someone who wasn't quite as used to hearing all these different iterations of a song realize it's like, oh yeah, I remember back when Daisy first started writing, there was those two little things that are still part of the finished version of the song. And so making sure that part of the process stays true. Um, I would say that maybe some of the very, very early parts of the writing process probably came more from on-set recordings, um, but then pretty quickly jumped into portions of it that were more developed and proceed.
Mm. Um, One song that really fascinates me, in terms of what your job might have been with this is it's episode 6, Whatever Gets You Through the Night. We're going to see Daisy forced to stop and start multiple times on the same song. So More Fun to Miss is going to get recorded, and it's meant to be a painful experience for both Daisy and the audience. So how much of this was Riley Keough actually just doing dozens of different versions of the same handful of lines, and how much of it was you being able to play with it in post?
I would say most of it is a great job by Riley, but there were definitely aspects of the timing of that stopping and the starting and the pauses after is a big part of that. Along once again with that experience of having sat in that scene in real life, and knowing the feeling that's going through all of our heads in the room as that is going on, and the uncomfortable aspects of it, and just kind of trying to recreate that feeling within myself, just like, oh yeah, these are one of the hell moments that we remember for years later because they were no fun to be there. Um, as far as the of course the visual expressions and so on of both Riley and Sam there, that's just great work on their part.
Episode 8 is just must have been like quite the gauntlet for you, because looks like We Made It is basically just like one concert scene after another. So we're gonna get a handful of songs from the album, but they're gonna be presented to us multiple times throughout the episode because this band is meant to be on tour and we're trying to show a time lapse for the tour. We also need it to seem like they're performing these same songs in different venues in different cities. Even though their setup is probably the same in each one, it has to somehow feel distinct in each location.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got Daisy at the same time becoming more and more impacted by her substance use as this episode is going on, getting to a point where at times we can barely even make out what words she's trying to sing, if she's singing at all. Um, it seems like this would have been an episode that would have been very, very heavy for your work. Tell us about working on this one.
The whole sequence of episodes that go through this tour, and the eventual the issues that the band have through it. First of all, the repetition is a big part of the touring, and just that in itself, the fact that we are hearing the same songs again and again and again is a big part of that life of that part of the touring. Um, and then, as far as trying to communicate the changes that do happen within that, the different venues, the different feels of the audiences in each one, that just became a thing of sort of changing the sonics in each location and each city so that they would each be somewhat unique, choosing different portions of the songs to present each time, um, choosing, sometimes altering the arrangement. It's like back in the day, in the 70s, when you went to go see a live concert, you could tell that the band was free to improvise a little bit more within each performance of the song, and you knew that from night to night on a tour, they may play a song considerably differently as compared to nowadays. When you go see a song, a big show, it is often very structured, and there's not a lot of room for ad-libbing. Um, but back then, that was definitely more part of it. So I may have not only used a different section of the song, but used a section of the song that presumably wasn't played the night before. And so that gave me a lot of latitude within using the different performances, but still being able to uh, change them up enough that they did seem like a different place. That also gave me a tool to work with, whereas I wanted to show any form of progression, either upward or downward, depending on which aspect we're emphasizing. Um, it also gave me the ability to have the same section of the song, but present it differently, as so that we could see the contrast in how this was performed early on and how this was performed later.
When we get to episode 9, which is feels like the first time, Daisy is still reeling from a near-death experience she had at the end of the previous episode, and we're meant to hear that in her performance.
Mm-hmm.
She looks just like meeker and more fragile on stage, but also her vocals have to reflect that as well. And I actually wonder to what degree the other band members need to sound like they're a little fragile too about the experience. I'm not sure to what extent that was a conversation that you had or a thought that you had, but how do you approach mixing songs, especially at the start of episode 9, where everything's just a little bit touch and go with people on stage?
Um, uh, for me, really playing a lot off of the visual performances by Riley, and the unspoken communication as you catch the looks between the different members of the band and so on. You can tell that they're uneasy about aspects of it. Um, in terms of mixing, uh, first of all, in editing choices, it would be I would say I would be using increasing amounts of Riley's live performances on set so that I could get she's obviously not singing perfect at that point, and so she did a great job of providing some really good, not perfect performances from the, technically perfect, but perfect for the scene. And so she gave a lot of great material from there to work with. That and once again allowing some portions of the mix to be a little bit more chaotic than it would have been when they had it a little bit more together, and just a combination of all of those things, and really playing so much off of what the visual is at that moment.
You might have been answering this question a bit when we talked about episode 8, but in episode 10, Rock and Roll Suicide, we're going to get Daisy Jones and the Six's final performance across the whole episode. So we're going to see them at Soldier Field, and we've heard all these songs before. At this point in the
Mm-hmm.
show, we've heard
Mm-hmm.
them. But this concert needs to feel like a distinct and special event to us. So, what type of things might you have done to make this episode stand out?
I believe Soldier Field had its own sonic signature that was used, so it'd stand out a little bit more. Um, there was a lot of in all of these shows, but as a, a sideline for the arc of the big performances, um, there was also a lot of some from me, but also a lot of work from Matt in terms of the audience reactions to a lot of what's going on stage. That's a huge part of making these live performances look and sound real, is what the audience responses are. So that wasn't necessarily my part, other than maybe doing some editing where we had the audience singing along in places, um, and making that work well. So that the audience response was a big part of these, and then just that thing of when we get the interruptions in the performances as they're as the dynamic of the band is entirely breaking down on stage for us all to see, people playing when they shouldn't be playing, or not playing when they need to be playing, or obviously playing the wrong part, or the people trying to hold it together, like the the drummer is going to play through no matter what happens around him. Just a lot of, once again, a lot of little musical cues here and there that sort of sum up to that kind of imploding feeling that we get as that episode goes on.
You raise a really interesting point that I didn't even think about. How are you all getting that audience, like the call and responses that the audience was doing, or when they were just like when Daisy would hold the microphone up to them and you do that a couple episodes. I mean, especially during COVID or like the immediate post-COVID,
Mm-hmm.
you certainly don't have a track with that volume of people singing on it. How is that
Uh,
magicked together?
there was some movie magic. It's there were some performances. The big arena scenes were shot uh, mostly down in New Orleans, I think, and there were some of the extras. So there were some performances by the extras singing along, and so a combination of those, uh, with some more editing, with some other um, uh, loop group performances, some additional ADR type performances to the film. Um, just to add, just kind of some little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit of scooching this over, and doing some sonic tricks to make it sound bigger than it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, big part of it.
It's like,
And
well, we had 50 people here, but let's just pretend it's as many people as would be at the
I think, yeah. I
audience.
mean, I'm not sure what the call was for the extras on those shows, but I think maybe they had 100, 150. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
that was sort of a basis for where to start with, and getting some uh, a few multiple performance of those. So we might be hearing the same 100 people twice at the same time, that kind of thing
Yeah.
going on. But it was, yeah, that was definitely part of the part of the lifting, the heavy lifting on this show. But that I did some, and then of course Lindsay and Matt doing that out in the dubbing mix as well.
So
All
interesting.
working together.
Well, you've gotten a chance to name some people along the way here, but who are some of the unsung heroes that maybe you haven't talked about that you want to shout out and make sure we know about their work on this project?
I would say, I mean, the two people that really come to mind, because they were the people in post. We've seen their credits, and we kind of know that's the Lindsay Alvarez and Matt with the sound effects there. But I would say in production, we had some great help from Sam Stallings, who was Frankie's assistant, and she helped throughout all of the band rehearsals and helping to establish what was going to be recorded during the live performances on set and so on. She did a lot of great work on it. Our instrumental coach, Ryan Hommel, who was great with teaching the actors the parts, um, which in some cases was not easy. We're coming from a Blake Mills guitar part to someone, teaching someone that either the part or a version of the part that's going to look right on stage, and coaching the actors and how a rock band looks when they play, and so on. So I would say that and Frankie Pine, of course, who was right there in the thick of it through all those rehearsals, and being a great source of information and cheerleader and drive for everybody. So I would say, from my aspect of that's who I saw during the production. That was great. And then of course later in post, our music editors just everybody. That's one of the things I love about doing the film and the TV work is that there's always such a big and a great team that develops by through the course of the production that is great to work with.
Is there anything else you want us to know about the music from this show that hasn't come up yet in these questions?
I don't think so, other than I hope everybody enjoyed it. You know, that seemed to happen. It was kind of funny once a few things got out into the wild and started being heard. Then it was great to hear the audience reactions and the desire to hear more from this band. You know, the way that everybody um, bought into Daisy Jones and the Six as a band in such a complete and utter uh, jumping right in there and accepting them as real people. You know, I think that was just a great thing, exciting part about working on this show.
Must be so rewarding when you do the kind of work that you do to have that sort of response. I mean, there were people for a long time still asking for season two and a
Hmm.
tour and all of
Hmm.
those things. Um, yeah, so in terms of this is a chance for you to plug anything else that you want. Is there anything else that you're working on or have worked on that you want to direct our attention to?
Um, uh, right now, it's just in general, you know, it's like we need, there's been some big hits to the industry over the last few years. And just if you enjoy the stuff, go out and see it or, you know, subscribe and see it. Just keep enjoying yourselves.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking time and talking with me and really giving us a much better sense of what went into your role and this other look that we might not have considered about the show. I really appreciate you taking all this time and talking with me.
Glad to be here.
And to everybody who's watching this, go out there. Don't be the muse. Be the somebody. Bye, everyone.